Abbey Road Orchestra Strings by Spitfire. Is it worth it? Almost $1,800 for all these string libraries, not including bundles and sales. Is this the most deeply sampled library that has ever been created? In this video, you will find out how it sounds, how it works, what doesn't work, and my conclusion at the end. So don't miss that one. Let's get going. Hello there, this is Sound with Seconds Here Sound. Really nice to see you here. So Spitfire is one of my favorite instrument companies. They had great string libraries and orchestral bundles in the past. And now they've gone sort of to the next level, creating really massive, very advanced, deeply sampled instrument libraries. They started with the percussion series, and now they've also done strings. I thought this is a massive, very expensive library, and I wanted to show you as much as I could before you decide you want to purchase this or not. So let's go a little bit deeper. And I also wanted to mention that I'm not sponsored by Spitfire. In fact, I can say whatever I want, and maybe Spitfire won't like what I have to say about this one, actually. Let's start with seeing or listening to what it sounds like. Here is a short excerpt from a project that I'm working on right now. I just wanted to let you know, though, that I'm using just legato samples. Well, actually, there's 2 pizzicato notes here at the end, but otherwise, just legatos. I haven't tweaked the sound in any way. It's straight out of the box, and the reverb that you hear is from the plugin itself. Unfortunately, there are no ensemble patches in this library, but let's go a little bit deeper into detail what each instrument can do. And the great thing is that they all work the same, so it's very easy to set up. We first have the performance legato, and I will talk a little bit more about that later, but the violins one is still very, very beautiful. Repeated notes I found a little bit tricky, but if you hold the pedal down, it usually works. But you have to lift the pedal because otherwise it continues and grows larger and larger in volume because it stacks on top of each other. Then we also have the lyrical legato, and it's very similar, but it doesn't have the shorts as the performance legato has. In fact, I should show that. So again, the lyrical legato does not have that. It's a slower, more melodic legato. It sounds really wonderful. I really love the sound. Then we also have longs, which are pretty straightforward, but they kind of work as your ensemble patch because you can play several notes only within the range of the instrument, obviously. Let's turn off the vibrato. And back on. Also in this extended version, you can obviously hit it differently. So if you hit very soft, you have a smoother start in the middle, quicker attack, and then if you hit really hard, you get that dig in. So that's really lovely that you can have those 3 different starts there. Then we have the flautando, and as always in Spitfire, it's really lovely. Instant mood starter. And as you can hear, the dynamic layers is really something here, makes it come alive. It's very smooth, the transitions between the dynamic layers. Now we come to my favorite part of this library, actually, the shorts. They are something else. They're not just dynamic, the sound changes when you hit it harder, so it really becomes much more alive than other libraries I've tried. You can go from the really soft, playful to really nasty. Also considering all the mic positions you can change here, and you can even play with the release and tightness. Let's have the release, for example. So if you have full release on the shorts and short release, you can hear that difference. It sounds basically like there's more reverb, which is kind of true. There's more room in it, but I still like that you have that control. You can make it drier and tighter. You can also work with the reverb on top of that. And then let's go to tightness, which is quite important because if you have it all the way up, the sample starts a little bit later. And it makes it easier to play. Now, if you have it all the way back, then of course there's going to be more latency because there's more, pre-samples. I find that actually this needs to be a little bit tweaked. And the violence, it sounds really good, but in other patches, they cut in too much into the sound. It doesn't do that in the violence, but I find this is mostly useful for when you want to be a little bit more tight when you record, and you can also always dial that back to get the full sample later. Let's listen to spiccato as well. You could hear again the dynamics is just something else here. And then the staccato. And then the marcato, really dynamic one, because marcato usually is when you dig into the strings, right? Like this. Which is wow. I really love that sound. But you can also play softly and get that more similar to tenuto quality here. So you can go from and it does something to my emotions when I can have that much control in the dynamic layers. So the shorts are just almost worth the ticket. Almost. Talk more about that later. Then let's listen to the tremolo. And I know you've heard tremolo 1,000 times before, but what's really good about this tremolo is, again, the dynamic layers. Listen specifically to the softer dynamics. You see, it's not just a lower volume, it's really that, wow, tension building. Okay, harmonics I'm going to skip right now. They sound great, but let's go to something more interesting here. Pizzicato. And this one is not only dynamic and have lots of round robin, and also a nice surprise at the end when you hit harder. Love that. And I really like it because when you hit it several times, you don't hear the repetition as much. And then col legno, which I really like because most collegians I've tried in the past, they sound very repetitive. There are not too many samples, or round robins rather, and also not much difference in the dynamics. This one has that. So it's much more interesting to play. I've always been bothered about that in other libraries, that it sounds very repetitive. This one doesn't. Okay, let's look at the trills. As you can see, I've only loaded the major and minor, but I will show you the other ones as well. So here's the minor one. Again, pay attention to the dynamic layers here. That's really what shines here. Let's also take a look at the thirds. And the major one. It's really just these sounds with a dynamic curve. It creates atmosphere. So really lovely there. And also, let's take a look at the measured tremolo. And I wanted to show this because I'm a little bit disappointed with this one. It does sound all right, but only at certain tempos, because this is just a time-stretched sample. And you need to make sure that that time stretch is actually on here, sync to tempo. Otherwise, it will only play the BPM that it's set here. It has two. It has 150 and 180. But I feel like it's really missing a lower one because it sounds all right. Let's try here. But you can hear already on 90 that it's artifacty. It's like, it's not made for that tempo. So let's speed it up a little bit here. And let's go back here to it. And you'll hear it sounds better now. But it misbehaves. When I play more than two notes, it doesn't always work. See, if you listen carefully, you will hear that some of the notes just stop playing. See, the D there just disappeared until I lifted it. So it's misbehaving. It's not well optimized. It just feels like they copy and paste that one from the previous libraries. Don't know if that's true, obviously. Then we have the legato détaché, and that you could do with the performance patch, but I'm including it because I find it's harder to perform that one. And it's a really nice sound. I wanted to show you how the interface works, and if you already own some of the other Abbey Road instruments, then you can skip this section. But I thought otherwise it would be important for you to see how the interface actually works, because it's something that you can spend a lot of time with, so it's quite important. The Spitfire engine or interface is excellent. It's well laid out and easy to control. You can change the size, and you can even make it half as big if you need to. We have the main controls here. Modulation and expression by default. You can also click here and select what you want to control. All these are actually quite important. So if you want to see them all at once, you can click on FX, and here they are laid out in one window. I do recommend you actually connect all these to a fader of some sort if you have them, because you might want to change them actually. All right, then we have mic controls, and it's usually by advanced on default. The bad thing about this is that there's so many that you might get quite overwhelmed. And if you use a lot of them, your memory doubles or triples. So that's something to think about. The absolute great thing about it is that you can really control the sound. You're not stuck with one recording in one hall even. I mean, it is the same room, but because of the mics being placed in different areas, you could really shape the sound, which makes this library not just one sound, but a whole bunch of different string libraries, you could say. You can even change the stereo field here. And as you saw before, you can click off the advanced one and you can just have one slider, which makes it a little bit easier. And honestly, I don't use a lot of the mic positions myself unless I really find that I need a specific sound. but I do know a lot of people who love this. Then we have the articulations here, and there are quite a few, and you might think like, wow, that's a lot. Believe it or not, there are quite a few people who think this is not enough. It's like, are you crazy? Well, I will talk more about that later, what I miss. But I have to say that there are definitely enough good articulations here that covers pretty much all you need to do. And one thing you might want to do is to go in here on this pen, click here, and then you can actually remove the ones you don't use because they take up a lot of memory. You can listen to them here. You can see the information here. One thing also to think about, if you use the Pro library, you might want to remove some of these legatos down here because they are already covered in the performance patch here. The performance patch can do several different things, several different legatos, like the allegro legato, the portamento, slurred, and all that. One reason you might want to leave it in is because if you find it's difficult to control exactly the legato you want with the performance patch, you can just select that particular one and it will only be that. You won't go back and forth. For example, the runs. But in general, I remove a bunch of these that I don't use and I save up a lot of memory. So if you have the core version, then you won't have the extended version. And that means that you won't have the different attacks when you hit the notes differently. Otherwise, it's very self-explanatory. One thing I really like here is that there are different ways to control your articulations. And this is very important to me. Most people might use key switches, but I prefer the CC range. There's also the MIDI channel, which is really good if you have that kind of setup. If you have the key switches on, you can click here, hold it in, and drag left and right, and your key switches, which you don't see right now, will move up and down so you can put them where you want them. You can also lock the whole thing, and you can look at the round robins here. You might want to have less for some reason to save some memory, or you want a certain sound. Up here, 3 dots that a lot of people miss. Quite important, actually. By default, this signature tempo is off, so you want to put it to on. Then the measured tremolo works correctly. You might want to play with some of these also. Well, this next section is probably not going to be well liked by Spitfire, but I think it's really important to show you what I find problematic with this library. I mean, if you're going to pay that much money, and this is supposed to be the next level in detail, I find these issues rather disconcerting. Well, maybe I'm just picky. You be the judge. Let's start with the performance patch. Spitfire is well known for this. It's a really nice patch where you can do pretty much everything you need. You have everything in your fingertips, so to speak. And the Abbey Road is pretty good at this. Yes, I didn't like that last part either. I was trying to do a run, and maybe I didn't play it perfectly, but it doesn't sound good. It doesn't sound like a run at all. It sounds like a bunch of notes strung together in trying to sound like a run, and it's clearly MIDI-ish. And so you might say, well, that's because you're using the run articulation. You're supposed to use the legato runs, right? It sounds better. It definitely does. But you would think that you would be able to do this here, because that's how it used to be, or is, with the Spitfire Symphony Orchestra. It's way better here. And Cinematic Studio, much cheaper library, you can do this in their Mercado patch. All right, a Flatus doesn't really have it, but it still has sort of a performance patch. And its party trick is that it can play several legato notes at the same time. which none of their libraries can do. Abbey Road does not have multi-legato, it does not have a great performance patch, and it does not have a great run patch. All of these libraries are way cheaper than this whole string library. This is not good. And I hope they can fix the performance patch in Abbey Road, because if you're going to spend that money on the Rolls-Royce of string libraries, it better be better than the previous ones, especially if you sort of invented the technique in the first place. Then let's take a look at the legatos. Now, I like the legatos. It sounds very good, very natural, but it's a big problem here that I think is a misstep, and I hope they will fix. The legatos in Violins 2 are really bad, and it has to do with the volume in the legato samples. Listen. Did you hear that? The bump in volume for the second note? This is totally unacceptable. The Violins one is better here. Just wanted to show you the difference here. The Symphony Orchestra also has a tiny bit of volume bump, but listen to this one. Cinematic Studio is the king of smooth legato, and that library is $400. Okay, just wanted to say that. Spitfire needs to fix the Violins 2 legato, because otherwise that is useless in my mind. If you play quickly, it works fine, but slower passages, quarter notes, it doesn't work, and so they need to fix this. This is very, very serious. Just in addition here, I thought I should tell you that I discovered by messing around a little bit more. I do want to say that none of the performance patches run well, but Violins 1 is definitely the best performance patch. It sounds really good, but none of the other ones really do any good at all. Those performance patches not really behaving as they should. Too many spikes, weird legatos, and the legato volume is too loud. The worst one is Violin 2, but the other ones also have this problem. I've discovered though that if you use the specific articulation like legato, allegro, for example, then you can get better results. But I still hope that Spitfire really tweaks these performance patches better, because they're not good enough right now. Too many spikes, too much volumes in the legatos. Okay, then we have measured tremolo. It's a nice little thing. Then Cinematic Studio has an interesting solution to this. It has a scripted little thing. Now, you could do that by just selecting, spicatissimo and go. Sounds lovely. Sounds really good. The shorts are amazing in this library. They really are, but I've talked about that before. They also have something called measured tremolo that is a sample that is following your DAW's tempo. This sort of works. It's not $1,000 library good enough. You basically divide it up to 150 BPM and 180, and then sort of the engine is then stretching the sample to match the DAW. But if I go below 90, it's just too many artifacts. It doesn't sound good, and I sort of don't use it. The articulations in this library is very good, and I think they're good enough. It's really what you need. I removed some of them actually because I don't use all of them. But I'm missing what I called the tenuto sample. And they used to have it, or they do have it here. Listen to this. I love this one. And they even have a shorter one. It's that wow feeling, right? Not the wow feeling, but that the way the dynamic curve is wow. It's so difficult to do with most string libraries, and it's very essential in string music that you can do this, right? You have to really tweak it with the modulation wheel and the CC11, and it's very difficult and takes a lot of time. And I love Spitfire Symphony Orchestra for having that one, and I wish they had it here. What they do have is the Marcato, which is sort of similar. It's right, it's there, yeah? But it has a sharper attack because it is a Marcato, and it's not as long. case I'm nitpicking, it is still a very good sound, but I just wish they had a longer tenuto in there. And the last thing that I think is a miss with this library is that they don't have sordino. I think I understand what the point is here. The whole Abbey Road Orchestra is supposed to be deeply sampled, everything real, nothing filtered, nothing like that. It's all in there. So maybe they will release a sordino library, but it's starting to become a little ridiculous to me. The library is massive. It takes so much space on your hard drive. And now you can have even the double size in order to have sordino as well. Because all of these libraries here that cost less, right? They have sordino. And even if it's real or not, I think the symphony orchestra is real sampled. I don't know. I mean, it still sounds great, even if this is a sort of impulse response and a filter on top. It works. Nobody's saying, oh, that's a sample with a filter on top of it. This symphony orchestra, I forgot what it is now, but it's a whole entire orchestra with great sounds. One of the best on the markets for the whole orchestra. And it's less than just a string library. And it works pretty much the same. We have Cinematic Studio here that costs about $400, I think. And it does a lot of things better than this library. And it has sordino. And it has great legato. Now, the problem with the Cinematic Studio is that it's difficult to play, but it's still, the end result is fantastic. The Flatus, yeah, that's a pricey one, but it's still not as much. And it has way more interesting ensemble patches. It has multi-legato. It has a smoother legato. And it doesn't have those problems. So, what's the verdict? Well, there are some good news and some bad news, unfortunately. Well, let's start with the good things. This is a fantastic sounding library. There's nothing like it out there. It has more dynamic layers than anything I've heard. It's recorded in a great hall, so you don't need a reverb on this one, and you can even dial down that quite a bit. Very, very lovely sound. I particularly like the shorts. There's so many dynamic layers here in Round Robins that you really can get exactly that super, super tiny short or the really massive, aggressive one. And with the mic positions, I can really tweak the sound to get it exactly what I want. So on that sense, yeah, it's lovely. It is the best string library out there. But as I talked about previously, there are a lot of problems, and Spitfire need to fix them in my mind for it to be worth the asking price. Because this is an expensive library and it's supposed to be the best they offer. And I don't think it is, because Spitfire's Symphonic Orchestra does a better job in terms of the performance patch. The Abbey Road doesn't have sordino, and I think the legato is still better in Cinematic Studio strings. That library is more difficult to play. It's very easy to play the Abbey Road, and that is great, but I can still get a better result in the Cinematic Studio strings. So this is difficult because I truly mean it when I think this sounds great. There are many great things about this library, and there are things you can do here that is very difficult with any other library. So maybe if you are a seasoned pro, you do this and you want to go to that next level and have that control of all your samples and shape the sound exactly the way you want it. But even if you've done this for a while and you just want a good sounding library, for almost a third of the cost, Cinematic Studio strings, I think it's a better deal right now. Doesn't have the same quality. I mean, it has good quality, but it's not that kind of quality. But the legato is way better. Just is. And the runs are way better. And he has sordino. And the other libraries I mentioned, they have also a lot of other party tricks that really make them a better deal. I mean, Spitfire Symphonic Strings has a whole orchestra with it. It's a really good orchestra. It's one of the best orchestra packages out there. A Flatus, which is quite expensive, has a lot of party tricks. Yeah, great sound. Really love it. It is the best I've heard. It's got some problems. Spitfire needs to fix them. And also, it's taking so much space on your hard drive. Because if you have, for example, all the Abbey Road percussion, and who knows what they're adding to that series later, because I think they're probably are going to have more instruments, and maybe they have sordino later. I have a fast, good computer. It's not a slouch. It's made for this. I have a lot of RAM. I have a lot of SSD drives that are quick, and I find this struggle. It takes a while to load these libraries, and just to load 5 instruments, I didn't even use all the samples. I was up in 10, 12 gigs just for the strings. But if you're going to load all the drums and everything else in a big orchestra, it's going to take its toll, and it takes a while to load for some reason. I hope that all the information you have gotten from me will make it easier for you to decide if this is purchase for you. I'm not saying avoid it. I'm not saying that. It's actually a very good library. But do be aware of these problems that I've told you, and think about if this is for you in terms of where you're at and how you work. So hopefully Spitfire don't hate me now, but hopefully this was a good review. And until next time, make sure you create a lot of music and take lots of care.